Hello everyone and welcome to the Servlet Basics tutorial. In this tutorial we will be looking at the very basics things of the Servlet, why we use the Servlet, what exactly is the Servlet. So when I was learning the Servlet I had very difficulty understanding the very basics of the Servlet, so I had to go through many tutorials. So that is why I have created this tutorial so that you will have a better understanding of the very basics of the Servlets. So let's get started. So what exactly is the Servlet here? So as I have also written here, Servlet technology is a server component. Okay, it's a server component which is used to create a dynamic web application, and it is using Java language to do that. All right. So now where exactly is this web application? So web application resides on our web server and it creates the dynamic web pages. And how does it create the dynamic web pages and what exactly is dynamic web pages? Let me clear that first. Okay, so there are two types of web pages. One is static and one is the dynamic. So static is like, suppose client is sending the request to a web server for a particular website. So suppose I'm sending a request for my website. Suppose I have created some website for my portfolio website. So in there I will have my basic details that I have already written there and I have kept it. So whenever I will send a request, I will get that particular thing which is already available. There is no processing. It's already there. Web server is just serving me that particular page and I'm getting it as a response. But in case of dynamic web pages, consider client is sending a request which has a form and it is doing some addition in that. So user is entering two number, and when we send the request we need to get the result. So in that case, when it reaches to the web server, every time it has to do some processing, right? So there will be something in the backend that will do the processing, right? So that is where the dynamic web application comes into the picture. Okay, so another example is, suppose you have a Facebook profile. So every time you click on your Facebook profile, it has to load your details, all right, from the backend, from the servlet or from the whatever the backend they are loading. So it's a dynamic. They are getting your data and then you are getting it back on the client side. So here client is sending request to the web server. If it's a static page, you will directly get the response from here. But in case of dynamic web pages, suppose in web server there is something called web container, and the very famous web container is the Tomcat. You must have heard that. All right. Now what web container does is, web container is a part of web server that interacts with the Java servlet. All right. So suppose I am sending a request which adds the two number. So now I'm sending the client request. Okay, so now web server will ask the web container for the addition of two number page. So suppose I have add.html. So it will ask Tomcat that, do you have anything like add.html? So Tomcat will say, okay, let me check with this my servlet. So it will send the request to the servlet, and as servlet is written in all Java, so what exactly we'll do here inside servlet is, see, inside servlet, Tomcat, our web container, is sending the request. Here inside that there are two main important things. First is the web.xml. In web.xml we will do the configuration that whenever user is asking for that particular URL, we need to call this particular servlet. So suppose www.abc.com/add, if this particular URL is getting called, you need to call this particular servlet. So this web.xml will ask the servlet that we need to call this particular add servlet.java file. Then it will do the processing and then it will send back the result to the web container, and then it will send back to the client. So this is what happens. All right, hope you understand that. Now there are some life cycle methods and phases. So our web container, what it does is, whenever you create a servlet, it invokes some methods. All right, it does the instantiation for that, initialization for that, then the servicing and the destruction. So what exactly these are? So suppose there are three methods mainly: init, service, and destroy. So in init method is called only once. So suppose there is some database connection that we need to make, so that will be keeping inside the init method. Now in service method, we will be writing our logic, our business logic. So suppose there are 100 customer, that can be called n number of times. So suppose there are 100 customer, so Facebook profile, there are many customers that wants to fetch their profile at the same time. So every time they will send a request, it will process that and it will solve that. All right. And in destroy, whatever the destruction or server connection we need to disconnect, we all these things will do in here. So now I'll just create one project, Servlet project, and show you what the folders and everything looks like, and what this web XML looks like in there. All right. So I will just go to my Eclipse. I have already created this workspace, Servlet Basics. So I will just launch that. Now in here, you have to go to your file, new dynamic web project. If you don't see this dynamic web project here, you have to go to other, and then you will search for that particular thing from here. If you will search dynamic here, you will also get it under the web. Okay, click on next, give a name. I'm giving Servlet Part-1. All right, Servlet Part-1. Keep everything default, click on next. I'm keeping everything to default. Now here we need to click on the generate web.xml deployment descriptor. This is where we will do all our configuration for the servlet. All right, now hit finish and it will create the project for us. So now we are able to see this Servlet Part-1 here. So now I will expand that. I will just expand this a little bit. All right. So now in here, as you can see here inside src.java, here we'll be writing all our Servlet Java files. And now inside src, there is one file, one folder called webinf. Inside this webinf, we have web.xml. So in here we will be doing all the configuration that we need to do, all right, for the servlet. So that we'll be seeing in the next lecture. We'll create our first servlet project, and then we will see in the next lecture. Thank you so much for watching.